and just one goal or reason why you're doing this nutrition challenge. Okay? Doesn't have to be super deep. Just whatever.
I'm Heather, and really just to dial in my nutrition. I get lazy.
Yeah. I'm just gonna turn off the music.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Amanda, and I know nothing about macros, so this is cool.
Yay.
I'm Deanna. I've done macros, and I need to hit the reset button. I haven't done it in a while.
Yes.
Chris, and this is really superficial, but I found the perfect dress for Johnny's graduation, and it's got to be on.
Nothing wrong with aesthetic goals.
I'm Megan. Always felt like I was super fit and healthy, and I was recently diagnosed with pre-diabetes, so I'm working to work on my nutrition.
John, and just kind of falling off the diet wagon, so need to find a way back on.
I get you.
I'm Nikhil. I just want to lose some fat and balance my stress.
All right. I love it.
Awesome. I'm Joe, and I just always think it's helpful to dial things in a little bit. What's up, Chris?
Hi.
And almost like check in, like, am I actually getting as much protein as I think? Because I've weighed and measured before, but I don't currently, so it's just like a check things. Chris, why are you doing the challenge? That's the question.
I just want to learn from everyone else's tips and tricks to incorporate nutrition in everyday life.
I love it.
Sweet. Jared. Question today. Jared, why are you doing this nutrition challenge? What's like one goal or reason you have?
Man, that's heavy, real quick.
It's like that's deep. I don't
I don't
know.
know, just something that an extra challenge.
Awesome.
For summer.
Yeah, awesome. All right, I'm going to get you guys some boxes if you want them, and I'm going to hand it over to Abby.
Sorry, Joe, and we fell asleep. I'm making sure it's going to relaunch.
Here, I'll do that.
Okay, yeah. I'm Abby, and the question, I'll answer that question for myself as well. So I think of macro tracking as a tool, and it's something that like you pick up at times and set down at other times. And so I am like, while John and I are helping lead the challenge, I'm certainly like in the same boat as you all in terms of like, it's been a while since I've picked it up and done it like consistently. And so I'm also excited to participate as well as like lead. And so I'm going to jump in and get started because I do have a lot to cover. And so I just wanted to sort of start with high level, like big picture, like why do we do challenges at the gym? And then specifically, like why are we doing this type of challenge? It is a little bit different than what we've done in previous months. So first and foremost, anytime we do a challenge, it's for increased awareness, right? So just to be aware of your habits. I always laugh and tell the clients I work with, sometimes we walk around like floating heads. We're just sort of like detached from our bodies and really not paying attention to what we eat. We think we have an idea, but we like don't really know what we're doing. And so the other reason specifically for this challenge, and a lot of you had this in your why, you do want shifts in your body composition, right? Either I want to get leaner, I want to lose some body fat, I'd like to get stronger or whatever it is. But the challenge that we're focused on for the next few weeks really does have that target in mind. You want to change your body composition. We want to focus always on building habits for sustainability. Again, what you're going to learn, you may not do like, for the next 6 months. That's totally fine. I wouldn't suggest it, but it's the idea that you're building a skill set and you're learning how to do something so that you can use it at different points. And so, again, like Joe even mentioned, like this is something that you may have tried before. If you've never tried it before, I want you to learn and be able to come back to this at different times. And so here's a disclaimer that I always tell people. There is a difference between tracking and tracking accurately. And I think, I will have clients, they'll be like, I'm tracking everything I'm eating. Like I'm entering everything into my app and like nothing is changing. Just because you entered it in an app does not mean that that's what went in your body. So I always say a successful day of logging is a day logged honestly, and that's like a huge thing, right? So if you are eyeballing, if you were eating a lot of what I call BLTs, bites, licks, and tastes, if you've got kids, BLTs are probably in your life because that's like the peanut butter off the spoon, the hummus, spoon, the kid left, half-eaten bagel and you eat it before you throw it and wash the dishes, whatever. And so BLTs do count in this. And so your logging efforts will get undermined if you are not actually capturing everything that you're doing accurately. So that's sort of like my big picture is, don't tell me it's not working if you're not confident if some of this is going on, right? If you're like, that was a half a cup of rice, like I'm pretty sure, it's like you got to know that it's actually accurate for this to actually work the way you want it to. What we're going to talk about today, so I am going to go over obviously what are macros, short for macronutrients, why do we track, how to get started, just sort of some like general infrastructure tips and success, like how to set yourself up for success. It will be interactive. I've got some show and tell that we'll do as we move through. And so I'm going to start I feel like I need to I can't move this out a little bit, can I, Joe?
Unfortunately,
that's okay.
The cape, but I can do the switching.
No, it's fine, because I know you're, so obviously macronutrients, short for macros, protein, carbohydrates, and fat. So when we say macros, that's what we're talking about. All foods to some extent, they're made up of one of these, right? So again, foods can have combinations. They can be be dominant in one versus the other. We're going to go through these very quickly, just like basic definition. I do want you to pay attention to that bottom line in terms of how many calories per gram, because this is going to be relevant when we think about when you're putting stuff together. So first and foremost, pop quiz. The single most important macronutrient is protein, right? So if you get nothing else out of today, that is the most important. So we need it for a variety of reasons. One of the things I think that's really important to know is that it is the most satiating macronutrient. In other words, it's the one that keeps you the fullest, the longest. People don't often realize that. They think it might be fat, but it's actually protein. If you want to get leaner and you want to get stronger, this is you don't get to debate this. You don't get to say, well, it's not that, it's just an absolute must. Protein has to be front and center. For protein, it's 4 calories per gram of protein. So just tuck that in oh, thanks, Joe, this is better. Remember that number. Carbohydrates, also equally important, especially for the type of training we do here at the gym. Carbs do not make people fat. That is I know there's always sort of a hot diet of the year or past few years. I feel like low carb, keto, that has kind of become the fancy, exciting thing that everybody thinks this is what gets you lean and strong. Carbohydrates are not the reason why people don't get lean and strong. It's not the reason why people gain weight. You gain weight because you're eating in a caloric surplus, period. I don't care where that's coming from. But we specifically here, the way that we train, carbohydrates are absolutely needed. Do not avoid them. We'll talk about them. There are different amounts based on, you might have a medical condition. So for example, women who have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, they do tend to do better with a lower carbohydrate diet. So there can be medical reasons why you might want to watch carb intake, but overall, we all need carbs. They're important. Also, same as protein, 4 calories per gram. And the last one is fat. Also, fat does not make you fat. Another fact that people often get confused on. For women in particular, I think this is an area that has, depending how old you are, I'll date myself, I grew up in an era where everything was low fat, non-fat. Who remembers Snackwell? Come on. I remember being in junior high and eating Snackwell cookies because they were no fat. And it's actually, for women in particular, one of the worst things you can do is low fat, specifically for hormone purposes. It's really important for women to eat enough healthy fat for hormone balance. There's lots of different reasons that we need it. I do want you to notice there at the bottom, though, this is the reason why fat gets a bad rap. It is the most calorically dense of the 3 macronutrients. So for every 1 gram of fat, it's 9 calories. So this is why sometimes people will say, oh, well, fat does cause you to gain fat. That alone is not true. It's just because it's the most calorically dense. And so it's easy to overconsume total calories if you're eating a diet that has a lot of fat in it, whether that's I've worked with people before that were like, but I'm eating really clean. I'm eating a half a cup of nuts a day. And I'm like, do you know how many calories are in a half a cup of nuts? It's a lot. And so you have to be mindful that it's easy to kind of to exceed your daily caloric intake if you're doing a lot of fat.
Abby, can I just interrupt and just let
Yeah.
you guys know that we can send you this slide deck. as
Yeah,
well as the
absolutely.
Information that's in it.
Also, if I look at my watch, some of y'all know this, my son, he has type 1 diabetes, and so his blood sugar goes on my watch, and he's home, and so I will occasionally glance to make sure that he is okay. So, okay, so why should you track macronutrients? Like, why should you track macros? What is the benefit? So, just high level, some benefits. One benefit is, again, what a lot of you said, you do have specific body composition goals. You want to lose X amount of body fat. You want to get leaner for an event. We always laugh and say, there's nothing wrong with wanting to like look good in the summertime. That's not, superficial. That's just like, yeah, it's okay to want to feel confident when you go to the neighborhood pool and like be at the body fat percentage that you want. That second one is a point with my female clients in particular, comes up all the time, and that is tracking can be really beneficial if you have a hard time under-consuming food as much as you do over-consuming. A lot of my female clients, their lack of progress is not coming from overconsumption, it's coming from underconsumption. They're like eating enough food for a toddler and not for somebody who trains appropriately, especially the way that we train here. And so, again, it raises that awareness of actually how much am I eating on a daily basis. You are more likely, in my opinion, to stay consistent because you aren't restricted. So this is not again, with keto, it's like you can't ever have a piece of fruit or like no bread, no pasta, no pizza, no nothing. For most people, that's unrealistic. And I always tell my clients, any habit that's not sustainable is not worth doing. Right? So like it's not worth doing it even for 4 or 5 weeks if you can't see yourself in some capacity being able to continue beyond that. And so it does give you food freedom because it's like if I can make this work within sort of my budget, I can have it for the most part. And so I think it leads to food freedom. It forces you also to become educated about the nutritional value of food. Again, I can't tell you how many times when people start tracking, they'll be like, oh my God, I had no idea that this granola that I eat every day is like loaded with carbs or like is really high in fat, or you just, again, floating head theory. You're just detached and you don't really have any idea what's in the actual food that you're eating. And then obviously everybody here, we should be hopefully interested in wanting to increase performance at the gym. And I always remind people, you can come in here 5 days a week and train consistently. That's 5 hours of your week. When you walk out, you have hundreds of hours right outside of here, and what you're eating will undo all of that you put in while you were here if you're not mindful of it. And so if you really do want improved performance at the gym, it matters. It doesn't want to go. Okay, so this is something that I really want you to pay attention to. This is the order of priority. When you're thinking about, I want to, again, improve my body composition, where do I need to start? And I want you to start and think about at the bottom, and we work our way up from this pyramid. So what's interesting is that a lot of my, no offense to my males, but a lot of my male clients, basically they like to put their hand over everything at the bottom and they just want to look at the top 2 buckets. They're like, what supplements can I take? And like pre and post workout nutrition. That's like the only thing they think about. And really that's like the last 2 things. I could care less. Honestly, if you never even get to those last 2 buckets, it doesn't even really matter. As long as you're focused on those large foundational pieces, the first one at the bottom being calorie balance, meaning, am I consuming the right amount of calories that I need to consume for my goal, right? So whatever that goal is, if that is to lean out, if that is to get stronger, if that is to be in maintenance, you just want to hang out where you are, you have to know calorie balance. That can't be, we can't like hack our way around the fact that if you're not eating the right calorie balance, you just aren't going to get the results that you want. Then if you think a level up from there, so let's say you have 2 women, both are consuming 1,700 calories on a daily basis, but woman A is just like only looking at calories. She's not looking at anything else. She's just making sure that she eats within that range. And then like lady B is still eating 1,700 calories, but she is paying attention to her macro split, specifically protein. Their body composition will be different. They won't look the same. So they can be eating the same in calories, but that level up from there around paying attention to the macro split is where body composition starts to shift. And so, and then the level up from that is micronutrients. And what I mean by that are like vitamins, minerals, enzymes, fiber, right? Think about those bottom two as like quantity of food, and think about micronutrients as quality of food. And so, Joe, I'm not going fast enough. I'm not saying that quality doesn't matter, so I don't want anybody to misunderstand me, but I also want to note that if you are like focused first and foremost on body composition, you can't just say, well, I'm going to eat clean and get lean. It doesn't work for most people, because you can't still like ignore calorie balance. We have to start there and then like move our way up. I'm not a fan of like, if you've ever heard of like IIFYM, if it fits your macros, which is this like approach of like, if you can make junk fit, well then eat it. And I'm not a fan of that. I mean, I'm a fan of like, enjoy what you want to enjoy. So micronutrients do matter, but in terms of order of priority, those bottom two really are the most important, and then we kind of move our way up. Any questions about that? Okay. I pulled this quote. It's from Renaissance Periodization. They have a very good book, very detailed, but I loved this call out is calorie balance is the most important variable and body composition diet success for a very simple reason. It has the greatest impact on how much muscle you can gain and how much fat you can lose over any period of time. And it like goes through and explains like the why, but again, it is the single most important thing. You cannot get around this one factor. Another thing around macro tracking that I like for people to understand is that it's cyclical. And so what I mean by that is, you can do this approach of learning how to like know your calorie balance, weigh and measure your food, track your macros, but you also can have different goals in mind. So, for the majority of us that are wanting to get leaner in this challenge going into the summer, we're kind of in that cut bucket, right? Which is I want to lose some body fat percentage. My calorie target is going to look different when I'm in that bucket, right, than when I'm in muscle gain, when I'm in maintenance. Like, it's going to shift is my point. So this is a mistake I see people make, is they're like, especially women, not to pick on women, but I work with more women than men. Women kind of have this like magic number in their mind. It's like, well, I'm supposed to eat 1,500 calories, 365 days a year. And it's like, no, you're not. You should be going in and out of cycles. If I work one-on-one with somebody, I like you to think in 12-week cycles. Obviously, the challenge is not 12 weeks. But in terms of how long I would want you to stay in one cycle, specifically if you're in that cut bucket, I wouldn't want you to stay there longer than 12 weeks without coming out for at least 2 to 3 weeks, eat in maintenance, and then go back into that phase if you've not reached your goal. Again, muscle gain, this would be like, okay, I'm at my ideal body fat percentage, but I really want to focus on mass, right? I want to get stronger. I want to put on more muscle mass. You have to eat in a caloric surplus when you're in that bucket, right? So the target is different. Reverse dieting is a whole separate thing. That's basically, if I have somebody that has like years and years and years of chronic undereating, and I mean like chronic underfueling, sometimes what we find is they really have, metabolism damage gets thrown out kind of flippantly, but like you really can undereat so long that you like jack up your body for the most part. And so for a while, if you want to work on losing body fat, for some women, they have to eat, it's reverse dieting. It means you're like methodically adding calories for a while to sort of repair that before you can start going back down again, if that makes sense. And then maintenance is, I've hit my target, I like the body fat percentage that I'm at, I just want to hang out here. You need to know what that number is. I think everybody should know their maintenance bucket for sure. Like I think that's something that like anybody should know what it is. And again, know if you want to get leaner, okay, where can I kind of head back? What bucket do I need to be in? Does that make sense? Okay.
So, as a question.
Yeah, please.
You wouldn't go straight from like cut to gain. Like you would go cut to
Maintenance, exactly, absolutely. So you would stagger, right? So it would be, I'm gonna hit and maybe in 12 weeks, maybe I've lost, 5% body fat, but I'd like to lose 5 more. I'm not gonna just go another immediate 12 weeks. I'm gonna go 12 weeks, see where I'm at. Maybe for 2 to 4 weeks, I'm gonna eat at maintenance. Give my body basically a breather almost, right, to kind of recalibrate. Then I'm gonna do another 12 weeks to cut again, to keep going. And so the other reason why that's important is because this is done, if it's not done right, you will lose muscle mass and fat at the same time. When people try to do these like 30 days to get shredded, whatever, it doesn't work. And a lot of times you might lose a lot of weight, but a lot of that is muscle mass and fat. And what we're trying to do is, I always explain it. It's like you want to maintain your undercarriage, right? Like, it's like what's your muscle mass. You want to shrink around it. And if you're not careful, if you do it too aggressively, too quickly, or not the right way, like everything comes off together. And then like you feel like puffy and like that's that like skinny fat sometimes that you've heard people talk about where it's like, my body composition is not feeling right, and that is typically because you've done something too quickly or like not in the right order. All right, so now we're going to talk about actually how do you determine your own macro profile. So a couple of caveats here. There are lots of different opinions on this, and so by no means am I saying that this is like, the absolute way that you have to do it. All of this is sort of an inexact science to some degree, and so, but you got to start somewhere, and what we want to do as a part of this challenge is like resource you to know how to do it so that you have the knowledge. And so this is an image that I often show my one-on-one clients. So when it comes to calorie balance, there's 2 sort of bookends that I want you to think about. BMR, which is basal metabolic rate, that is not the same thing as BMI, like body mass index. Does anybody know what BMR is by definition? Okay, so BMR is, I want you to imagine you lay in a bed for 24 hours and you don't move. You just lay there, right? In theory, if you could do that. Your body, based on your age, your gender, how much muscle mass you have, how tall you are, how old you are, all of those factors, your body has a set caloric burn amount. Like it's burning calories every day to keep you alive, for respiration, for digestion, for just to give you the energy to like walk around and move, right? But that number is completely aside from any activity. That is just literally to keep you alive. I cannot tell you how many women that I work with that they come to me and they're already eating below their BMR. Their BMR is like 1,400 calories. They're eating like 1,200. And I'm always like, you're not even giving your body enough to like really keep you alive, right? And so you have to know that's sort of I cannot go below that. That's my absolute hard stop. I shouldn't even really be close to that number, honestly. I don't like anybody to get close to that. Because if you're eating at that number, you should be hungry, is the other thing. If that is keeping you full, that's like a whole nother conversation. So if that's one kind of my bottom threshold, the other end of that spectrum is TDEE, total daily energy expenditure. So that is BMR plus how active am I? What's my job? Am I sedentary? Do I take my dog for a walk every day? Do I train at the gym X amount of times a week? Like what's purposeful activity and movement throughout my day? That's sort of your high end of the spectrum, right? So there's those 2 bookends in terms of caloric ranges. A calorie deficit lives somewhere in between those 2 targets, right? And so you got to know what's my BMR and what's my TDEE to be able to even know what my range is, to know like where should I even start. But we have to be eating somewhere within that window if we want to lose body fat in particular. So how are we going to do this? So again, you'll have access to this. the easiest method, in my opinion, there's an online calculator. Now, again, is this like, exact science? No, but we're gonna work with it. You'll have access to do this. And so this will be part of your homework before Monday, is that you do this and like figure this number out for yourself. And so basically it's going to bring you to this website, and you are going to enter all of your demographic information, gender, height. If you know your body fat percentage, like if you've done the InBody and you have that number, go ahead and enter it, because that does give it an even like smidge bit more of accuracy. But if you don't have it, it's not a huge deal. It will let you calculate it. Yeah, absolutely. But here's the deal, guys. That activity drop down, I'm going to show you on the next screen. So like you pick a range of activity. So here, and I highlighted this in yellow, this is where people always mess themselves up, is that we are very bad at estimating our own activity, just like we're bad at estimating how much food we're eating. And so we'll be like, I'm at least moderate. I mean, come on, like I'm moderate. But if you are completely sedentary at work and you're training here 3 days a week, I'd argue that you're not moderate. I mean, it's really not. So my point here is that if you think you're somewhere like in between, I would err on the side of caution and underestimate, don't overestimate, okay? That's gonna be really important. But you can see in this example, when information was entered, it's that first line up there says, for this example, I think I actually may have entered my own data. My BMR is around 1,300 calories. So that's my left end, right, of that bookend. And then my TDEE on the far end is that 2,061. So that's my like range. So that gives me like the first piece of information that I need to know, because I have my bottom and I have my top number. But remember, I want to eat in a deficit. So I don't want to eat those 2,000, right? Because I'm trying to get leaner. So what do I do from there? You really have two options you could choose. One is you could take that top end number and you could try to eat that target for a week or two and see what your body does. Does it hang out pretty much weight-wise? Do you stay kind of where you're supposed to be? That is a way for you to verify that that really is my maintenance calories. Because again, if my body weight doesn't change for the most part, that's probably really close to my maintenance calories. The other option, which is what we're going to do, because for the sake of time, is we're going to dive straight into a deficit. And so typically what I'll say, if leaning out is your goal, so what you're going to do is you're going to take that number that it gives you, that high-end target, and somewhere around, I mean, you could do a range of 10 to 20%. I usually say split the difference and do about 15% in terms of a reduction. And let's start there to put you in a deficit, right? Because again, to lose body fat, we have to be eating in a caloric deficit. And so in this example, my target would be around 1,700 calories. So again, that's eating slightly below my maintenance. But again, I'm not trying to eat down at 1,300. A lot of people are tempted sometimes to be like, let me just like try to eat as little as possible to speed up my progress. Don't do that. The goal that of every client that I work with, and I know like philosophically at the gym, nutrition-wise, we believe this. Our goal is for you to eat as much food as possible and still be able to hit your goals. It's not about eating as little as possible. That's the opposite. And again, for women in particular, there's sort of, I see this mindset of like, let me just try to eat like as tiny amount as I can. It's like, no, try to eat as much food as you can and stay at the target. That's the goal. And so don't try to drop yourself too low too fast. The other reason is it gives you no room for modification, meaning, let's say that I'm going to eat at that 1,700 calories for, I do it for a week or 2 weeks, and my body weight is not changing. So it gives me a chance to say, okay, I can drop 100 calories. Let me try again, right? It gives me some wiggle room to kind of move down that scale. And so it gives me a buffer, right? So if you start at, 1,500 calories, well, gosh, I mean, I only really have 150 calories between my BMR and that number. I've not given myself much wiggle room, right? Also, I'm going to be miserable because I'm going to be hungry. And so start with as much food as possible and incrementally, like percentage-wise, move your way down. Does that make sense? So use the calculator, find your 2 bookends, take your high bookend number, that calories per day, and for a safe estimation, minus out 15%, and that number is going to be your like deficit target, okay? And then after you've got that, remember that visual image of calorie balance is at the bottom. Now we're taking one step up and we're going to talk about your macro split. Here, that yellow box, this is what's really important. The most important thing is that you stay within your calorie target and you hit your protein goal. I do not care where you land on carbs and fat. 95% of people walking around in the world, if they did those 2 things, they will get the body composition goals they want. If you're going to the CrossFit Games, no, you can't do that, right? Or even if you're training for like a marathon, or you're like an endurance runner, like you have to be more mindful of like carb intake, and your splits matter more about everything. But for all of us regular people that are not in those buckets, if you will stay within your calorie target and hit your protein goal, you will get the results that you want. And so also, guys, we don't need to overcomplicate it. If you've ever tried macro tracking in the past, or have read online about it, people get overwhelmed because it's like a jigsaw puzzle that you can't make the math work. It's like, but I went over on my fat and I'm under on my carbs and I can't get, it's like, don't do that. Just stay within your calorie target and hit your protein goal and you will be solid. So what should your protein goal be? So the goal, we're not going to make you start here in the challenge. I think we started with 0.6. We for the first week of when we're focusing on protein, but big target is the goal is to eat 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Okay. So example, you weigh 145 pounds. The minimum, that 0.8, would be to eat 116 grams of protein every day. You can eat more than that, obviously, but at a minimum. So for my females, again, in particular, this may be, this is usually the hardest thing, because when you start to track, you may realize that your average is like 70 a day, and you really need to be eating like 130, and that is a big jump. And so that's why with the challenge, we're doing it incrementally. We're not gonna ask you to hit that target right out of the gate. We're gonna work our way up toward that, but just know that's where we're headed, and that big picture is the goal, is to eat within that range. Does that make sense? Okay. A couple of things around adjustments. Where you start is not likely where you're going to finish. Like I mentioned, if you're, hitting your numbers and your body isn't changing, your weekly average weight isn't shifting, you might have to drop 100 calories and kind of start to adjust. And so just know that you may have to adjust as you go along. John and I in the group can answer those questions. Like if you think, should I adjust? This is what the data is showing me. That's what we're here to help you with. If you are in a deficit, you should be losing on average somewhere around a half a pound to a pound and a half. Men, boo hiss, y'all can lose a lot faster. So you might be closer to that pound to pound and a half. Women, we're slower. But that second bullet point, y'all, the weekly average weight, that if you have a healthy relationship with the scale and you can get on it daily and it not do anything mentally to kind of put you in a bad spot, I really am a fan, again, especially for women. Weekly average weight is so much better than just looking at what the scale says today. Our weight can fluctuate 2 to 5 pounds in a 24-hour period related to hormone shifts. For men, it can shift as well related to digestion. Did you eat a sodium bomb meal the night before? Have you had alcohol? Are you dehydrated? Are you on a medication? There's all different reasons. So when you stand on it in the moment, that's just that day. But if you take those 7 days and average it, as long as that average is moving down, then you know you're in a deficit and you're moving in the right direction. Does that make sense? The other thing to be mindful, and that is when we have the InBody, is if it's stuck, don't just assume immediately it's not working. You might have gained a pound of muscle mass, which again, there's going to be a net effect on the scale a home scale, right? It's not going to show that body fat, muscle mass breakdown where the InBody will. And so don't be discouraged immediately if you see that. But again, if you're not losing, you may have to do some investigation and kind of figure out what's going on, which we're here to help with that. Other ways to measure progress, again, weekly average weight, pay attention to your clothes, right? Are things fitting, It's weird, I don't know how to describe this, but every time I go back into a season of tracking, there is immediately where I feel it is this sense of, it's not like I will never have abs. It's not that I get abs all of a sudden, but there's this feeling of tightened up, specifically in my midsection. And I can feel it almost within 2 to 3 weeks. There's just a feeling that starts to happen of things are getting leaner and tighter, right? And so pay attention to those sorts of things. Progress photos, not that you need to share those with everybody, but take pictures. Stand in your mirror, your bathroom mirror, sports bra, shorts, front, side, back, and do that once a week and visually look at that. And just pay attention to energy, strength gains, sleep. Is any of that getting better? I call those NSVs, non-scale victories. And so pay attention, or is any of that shifting as well? Because all of that does reflect progress. It's not just about the skill. Okay, so we've talked about how to set your profile. Now we're going to talk about how do you actually start tracking and doing this. So the first thing is you're going to want to download a tracking app. Does anybody already have one that they use, have used, enjoy? Okay, some people do. Y'all, this is very personal preference. So MyFitnessPal is the most common one. They've changed. It used to be free, and now they've added where is it the barcode scanner now, and they make you pay for it? It's really frustrating. But MyFitnessPal does have sort of the largest database, that sort of thing. So a lot of people do use it. Me personally, My Macros Plus, I don't even remember how I found that app. It's been probably 8 years of me using that app. I love it. It's my favorite, but now all of my stuff is in there. All my recipes are, you know what I mean? So I've gotten used to it. They all pretty much work the same way. They're going to have a barcode scanner to scan items that have a UPC. You're going to be able to adjust to find things in restaurants, that sort of thing. The point is pick an app, and if you need suggestions, again, you can ask, and I'm happy to show you My Macros Plus if you want to see what that looks like. But MyFitnessPal probably has the lowest barrier to entry in terms of ease for most people. And so you are going to need a digital food scale. There's no way around it. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but you are. Now, you don't need to put this in your purse and carry it around all day long. I'm not asking you to do that. But you are going to need a digital food scale. This one is one of my favorite ones. It's Greater Goods. It's on Amazon. It's $9. Totally worth having more than one, too. If you have a partner and that's at home and going to be doing this with you, get two. It's very helpful. And what you're going to do, especially the first week of the challenge, is you're just going to get used to using your app, weighing your food, and entering it into the app. You're not even going to be trying to necessarily make adjustments to things. It's establishing the habit of, I weigh my food, I enter it into the app. I'm getting into that routine. That's going to be really, really important. And then what I want you to do is then at the end of the week, I want you to look at, this was my baseline. I didn't really change maybe anything that I ate for the first week. How far off am I from my target? So if this was my baseline, think of this first week as kind of inventory. I'm just taking inventory of what is typical for me. So you can see, okay, on average, I'm eating 100 grams of protein. I'm actually going to need to be eating 170. Okay, I got a gap I'm going to have to work on, right? It just gives you that baseline awareness. And so,
Oh, that was me.
Joe.
I'm trying to,
Oh, you were going to mirror?
You can do the thing if you want me to. It's working on here. Do you want to do it?
Yeah, it won't let me click it.
I guess I need to turn on screen mirroring. Or stop mirroring. I'm going to put this on screen mirroring. Do you want to is it worth taking a second to get this set up?
Maybe let's do it at the end, and that way, if we have time, then I can show that one for sure.
I think I can do it when you want to.
Okay, perfect. Joe. Oh, there it goes. Okay. One mantra I want you all to like burn into your brain is don't eat it until you log it. This is again a common mistake I see people make is they'll get to the end of the day and they'll be like, okay, now let me sit down and open up my app. I'm laying in bed. I'm going to like go back and I'm going to recall everything I did. Guess what? You're not going to remember. You at that point are eyeballing. You're not remembering. I wish I could tell you that there is a way to bypass this process. There isn't. And in the beginning, it will feel tedious. And if you will just know that up front, like, yeah, it will. It will feel tedious. It will feel inconvenient. It will get better. You get faster. It just gets more embedded into your normal routine. But embrace the feeling that it's going to be like annoying, because it is in the beginning especially. And so, but here's the deal, guys. If you eat your lunch and then you enter it and you realize, that had 20 grams of protein, and really at lunch I need to be having closer to 40, like it's done. Like you can't change anything. You're gonna have to be scrambling. You'll get to the end of the day, you'll have a big gap left of like, I need 50 more grams of protein because I didn't like space things out. And so if you will enter it as you're eating, it's going to be way better. So like, how do you like put your meals together? I think when people start thinking about macro tracking, they get overwhelmed of like, do I just need to like change everything about what I'm eating and like I can't ever have blank ever again? No, like start simple. And so basically one thing is when you start to put a meal or a snack together, just be mindful first, is protein present? Because a lot of people will realize, I often have a snack that has no protein, or I'm having breakfast that has very little protein or whatever. So just be mindful first and foremost, every time I go to eat something, where is the protein? What is in this? Is protein present? And like start with what you like and make adjustments. So in this example, like if you're somebody eating like 2 eggs, bacon, and a biscuit for breakfast, and that's a combo that you like, a way to make that more macro friendly might be like, okay, I'm gonna have an egg and egg whites like scrambled together, right? Because that lightens it up, adds more protein. I might swap out that bacon for turkey bacon. I don't have to, but that might be an upgrade. And maybe instead of a biscuit, I might have oatmeal, right? Because that's gonna be a better carb source. And so it's this idea of take things that you like. And again, this is where John and I can be helpful of like, this is a combination that I really like, but gosh, it's so like calorically dense, or it's so low in protein. Like what could I do differently? Or here's a lunch that I typically do. It has like 10 grams of protein. What could I do to kind of still eat this same idea, but like make it more macro friendly? Ask us and we'll be able to like weigh in and give you, and again, crowdsourcing all together, we'll be able to help one another. Another really important thing I would suggest that you do is take your protein target, like once you do your math and you figure that out, divide it by 3 and set yourself ranges for each meal. So for example, if you are trying to eat, easy math, 100 grams of protein in a day, right? Divide that out by 3 meals. So if you log a breakfast and it comes in at 15 grams of protein, that's an immediate red flag of that's not enough, right? I'm in a hole already because that wasn't enough protein. If you do it by 3, obviously that's not including snacks, so you still have some wiggle room in there of like making it up somewhere in a snack, but it at least gives you a mental target of when I enter this and I see that this has this much protein, if it's way off of my kind of per meal range, I need to make some adjustments. So this next one, for those of you that are very, very busy, or a barrier is going to be logging in the moment, I would highly suggest that practicing throughout these next 5 weeks at some point, this skill of pre-logging. So it's the opposite of you're laying in bed the night before, open up your phone, go to the next day, and just sort of pencil in your app. Here's what I think I'm going to do tomorrow. I think I'm going to have this for breakfast. Okay, I know lunch, I'm going out with a client. We're probably going to go here. I'm going to order probably the salmon. Like, it's just like going through, kind of take 10 minutes and kind of pre-plan your day. It's a lot easier to then the next day edit and make shifts versus like having nothing in place. So pre-logging can be helpful. The other thing of pre-logging that can make it pretty like a lot of people like this is it does remove decision fatigue, which as humans, we already are like bombarded all day long with like, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I go here? Should I not do, it's like all day long we're thinking about stuff. It takes it out of the equation, right? It's like, it's like eating like a meal plan. My app says, this is what I'm supposed to have for lunch. This is what I'm going to have for lunch. It's pretty straightforward. The other part, if you're someone who really has a sweet tooth and you're like, for me to survive this, I have to have something pre-logged that I can look forward to every single day. And maybe that is like a square of dark chocolate or some, I don't know, Halo top ice cream, whatever. Like it's something that you enjoy. Even if you don't pre-log your whole day, the first thing that morning, pre-log your treat. Even if you're not going to have it till bedtime. So that way you can eat around that versus I get to 9 o'clock, I've had a really crap day. I don't even want to be doing this challenge anymore and I don't care. And I'm about to have ice cream and forget it. And I'm going to like mess up my numbers. Instead of that, just like plan for it. I'm going to do this in advance. If you're going out on a date and it's like, I really want to have a glass of wine, I'm going to go ahead and pre-log that so I can kind of build my day around that versus getting to that and saying, well, forget it. I'm just going to go rogue and do whatever is better. Common mistakes that I see in tracking is first and foremost, picking the wrong item from the database. I said this in that recording with John and Joe. It's like I've had a client that like was tracking wings at Buffalo Wild Wings and it had 0 fat. And I'm like, no, come on. Like, look at the do you think that wings have no fat? Of course they have fat. So like be mindful. That's back to that. Just because you logged it doesn't mean it's accurate. So like pay attention to the entry. Like, does this even look correct? Is this even like a real entry? Because the thing with MyFitnessPal in particular, it is like Wikipedia. So like people can just go throw whatever in there and it isn't always accurate. It does have, in MyFitnessPal, it'll have a blue or green check mark. I can't remember what color it is. That's considered a verified item. That means MyFitnessPal has said that the nutritional value of this has been verified. It is real and correct. So I always say pick a verified item if you can. Again, estimating, we've already talked about that, not tracking your BLTs, not tracking alcohol. The other mistake is like trying to make a recipe with 43 ingredients the first week you try to do this. Like, don't do that. Don't make a layered casserole with 19 ingredients the first time you try to do this. Like, keep your meals more simple. It will make it easier in the beginning. Okay. We already talked about you've got to have a kitchen, a digital food scale. Get a flat surface one as opposed to a bowl one. Sometimes people will be like, I have one that's like, don't do that. You want a flat one. It's really important. I love this quote. If you ever want to see how far out of touch you are with reality, measure out a serving of peanut butter. And it is true. And so we're going to talk about, and I'm actually going to do an example of that really fast. And so if you have who has never used a digital food scale before? Okay, Megan, you haven't? So really fast here, I want to show you an example. So like if y'all want to come up here, it might be easier to like see this if you've never used one. They'll have different units, right? And you can just keep clicking it to cycle through. You want it to be on grams typically when it's something like this. So if you look on a label, this label says for 2 tablespoons, that's 32 grams by weight, and that's the calorie value is that. So I'm going to set my thing on here. I'm going to click 0. So now it says there's 0 grams on my scale. I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to scoop out, and come here, Megan, and tell me what this says.
19.
So that is 19 grams of peanut butter. So that is a much more accurate way of measuring versus like, is that a tablespoon? I don't know what it is. So you could log, I had 19 grams of peanut butter. So anything that is like a liquid or creamy like this, put it on the scale, 0 the scale out, scoop it out. And a lot of times will show a negative. It might say like -22 or -29. Whatever that number is the grams that are on your spoon. Then you can lick your spoon and get it all off because it's all accounted for versus like just trying to eyeball a measurement. And so that's why a food scale is your friend for a multitude of reasons. The other thing I tell everybody is when you think about setting yourself up for success over these next few weeks, think about your home environment. that really, you cannot control when you go to work. You cannot control, when you leave your home, you introduce variability, right? Like I can't control my environment per se, but when I'm at home, I can. And so just be mindful of, am I keeping things here that are making this harder for me, right? So if anybody listens to the Huberman Lab, he has a really great episode on like habit formation, and he talks about something called limbic friction, which is just the idea of like our brains, like the barrier to things, right? And having to think really hard and like make decisions, and like we increase a lot of limbic friction when we have like all of this stuff at our disposal at home, and it's like, oh, but I love Oreos, and I'll portion control, but then you eat a sleeve of them, right? Because it's just too hard. You don't need to be deciding. So this is different for everybody. Some people, that is not a challenge for them. Other people, it is really hard. So I just want you to be mindful of, especially with things like alcohol or sweets. It's like, if it's in my environment, it is 100 times harder to abstain or limit or portion control versus just saying, I'm not, or even think about it this, if you're not gonna not have it completely in your home, at least add a barrier of like, maybe the alcohol stays in the garage fridge and not in the kitchen fridge, or like maybe the ice cream stays in the deep freeze outside and not like immediately when I open my kitchen freezer. Because if you're choosing between like ice cream and spinach, like you're always gonna go ice cream because you're a human and that's just how it works. I love this quote. If a food's in your possession or located in your residence, either you, someone you love, or someone you marginally tolerate will eventually eat it. And that's true, right? If it's in the house, someone eventually is going to have it. And so when you put your diet together, again, this is something when people macro track, they're like, but what do I eat? And I'm like, what do you want to eat? That's what's important, because how you put your diet together it will vary widely based on like your culture, your background, your family traditions, your like just your preferences. The great thing about macro tracking, again, is it's flexible. So if you are someone who really enjoys whatever, like, I don't know, you really love having oatmeal for breakfast, like, well, then have oatmeal for breakfast. That's fine. As opposed to, sometimes I'll hear people say like, oh, I just wish somebody would write me a plan and like hand it over to me and you just tell me what to eat every day. Yes, in the short term, is that easier because it takes that decision away? But again, you're not learning a skill set. So at the end of that meal plan, what are you going to do? You still have to figure out how to like fuel yourself for the long term. And macro tracking forces you to kind of come up with what works for me so that I can set myself up for success versus somebody just writing you a meal plan and handing it over. Eating out. That again, pre-logging is really important when you eat out. So try to go ahead and like enter those things. I always say too, if something comes out and you're at, I don't know, Don Arturo's and it is swimming in oil, just go ahead and add like a tablespoon of oil to your log, okay? Because you know you got it. It's there somewhere. And so with eating out, I would rather you overestimate what you had versus underestimate. That's real important. And also, don't be afraid to, I don't know, be a Karen and ask it for the way you want it. Like, I don't want oil on it. I don't want you to, like, literally put it on the grill and don't put butter on it or oil or whatever. Like, you can ask for things to be made the way you want. And if you're going somewhere, I don't know, like Burger Up in Cool Springs and, like, they're not in your database, just pick a comparable item and log it, right? Again, it's not an exact science. Don't get hung up on, I can't find this entry. It's okay. Do the best you can. All right. Big question, alcohol. So just be mindful. So alcohol impedes the fat burning process. Okay. So every time alcohol is introduced, the body is going to prioritize getting the alcohol out of your system above burning fat. So the two most important things about alcohol as you think about leaning out and this challenge, it's quantity and frequency. So frequency, how often do I have it? And when I do have it, how much am I drinking? Those are going to be your two most important things to consider. It will have an influence over your results. There's just, I wish we could magic wand our way around that. We can't. It just is what it is. Does it mean you cannot have alcohol? No. It just means it will impede your progress depending on those two factors. Obviously, if you're swimming in the fishbowl of a margarita at the local Mexican restaurant, that's probably not going to be your better choice, right? Trying to think of like lower calorie things are going to be your best bet. And no matter what, obviously, binging on a weekend is not going to be beneficial to fat loss, like no matter what. This quote, I love it because it's not just about alcohol, it's bigger than that. But like, if you want to get leaner, like, it requires discipline and like sort of embracing the suck to some degree. Like if it was easy, well, yeah, we would all do it, right? So there is a degree of like, I work with clients sometimes and I sort of laugh and like, this is not like judgy, it's just this reality. People will be like, I really want this thing and I also don't want to change anything. It's like, well, you can't have both, you gotta choose, And so some of this it requires discomfort. Comfort is I come home and I don't have to think about any of this and I just sort of detach, floating head, I do what I want, whatever, and I don't think about it. That will just not get you where you want to go in terms of if you have specific composition results that you're aiming for. A couple of quick things at the end here. If you do get hungry, right, because your brain is going to tell you immediately, oh, you're starving. It will tell you that. It will really make you think that you are starving, okay? And so you're not. Just know that some of that, the brain is perceiving this as a threat. And so it's going to tell you, like, seriously, it's going to be like, you need more food, like you need to eat. You're not starving. Number one, boring. We're going to talk about this in the challenge, but like y'all, you got to drink water if you're not, okay? And like 24 ounces is not enough water. So ideally, at least like 60 to 80 ounces of water a day, like kind of low threshold. But you got to drink water. Number two, maximize volume foods. So think about foods that take up a lot of space in your stomach when you eat them, but are lower calorie. So things like broccoli slaw, spaghetti squash, like things that, again, are low calorie, but when you eat them, there's like bulk. And again, our brains and stomachs talk to one another. And so our brain is looking, when the stomach stretches and it gets full, it sends that message to the brain of you've had enough. When we eat things where there's never any stretch, the brain's like, that wasn't enough. Could you send some more? Like we're hungry. And so it sort of is a hack. It helps when we do that, when we eat things that have bulk in them, that are lower calorie, it helps manage hunger. Fiber, if you were going to look at one other like thing outside of your protein and your calories, it would be this. You really do need to pay attention to how much fiber you're getting. I mean, somewhere between 25 to 30 grams a day. It's the only other nutrient I typically would suggest that you pay attention to, especially if you're hungry. Pay attention to this. There's obviously health implications as well. This helps really, fiber is super important for blood sugar management as well. And so there's just a lot of reasons why fiber matters other than digestion. Remember that top of the pyramid, the last thing I care about is supplements, but if you do have questions about that, digestive enzymes, I have that up there only because sometimes when people start eating a lot more protein, they're like, oh my God, I feel like I weigh, like there's like a rock in my stomach, like it just feels heavy. And digestive enzymes, taking those with your meals can be helpful just for processing that. And so the only other one I would consider is a high quality protein powder. I have no affiliation with this brand. This is just the brand that I like. Legion is, I get it on Amazon. But I would say 95% of my clients, you're gonna need a protein powder. And it just helps considerably fill in those gaps. Okay, very quickly, I know we're like a minute over. Common frequently asked questions. We're going to talk about this more in the group, but like we're going to give you a little bit of wiggle room around what's the definition of hitting your target. Basically, we're going to say we said plus or minus 10%, didn't we, Joe? I think, and then it shrinks. Yeah. So in other words, like if your calorie target was 1,700, if you were plus or minus 10%, we're going to give you credit that counts. But then as the weeks progress, that percentage is going to get tighter. Like you need to be plus or minus 5%, right? Like with the idea that you're. You may see sometimes some discrepancies. Just be mindful. The FDA does allow discrepancies on a food label. So like it's not an exact science. So if you see sometimes some weird stuff between like what's on your label and like what pulls up in the app, like just try to be mindful. Some of that is how our food system works. It's not an error necessarily. This question comes up all the time about meat. Should I weigh it cooked or should I weigh it raw? Technically, the correct way is to weigh it raw. Like if you're looking at the entry and like if you're looking at a label, that is for a raw piece of meat. The way that I do this, because I think that's disgusting, and I'm not like, I don't want to pull out chicken breast and put it on a plate. I don't want to do that. So in the database, look for like cooked chicken breast. And so that way when you're measuring, like you grill a bunch of chicken and then you weigh that chicken, you're comparing apples to apples. Your entry is for cooked chicken breast. You're weighing cooked chicken breast. So just try to make sure it matches, like, and try to stick with one method and don't like mix and match. And that's the other way that you'll set yourself up for success. Okay, guys. It's 11:03. Questions?
How do you get enough carbs without going over on calories? I feel like that's something I've always struggled with.
So that's a great question. So some of it will be dependent upon what type of carb sources that you're eating. Okay, and so if you're eating things that are like, for example, this is a good example. So this granola, so if somebody is eating, 1/3 cup of this is 19 carbs, which is low for granola because this is like a more natural granola as opposed to like a different brand. A 1/3 cup might be like 35 carbs, right? And so one would be, do I have something that I enjoy that I can improve the quality of? Like, could I find a maybe lower carb version of this? If it's wraps, that's a good example. You can find lower carb wraps that are higher protein. So a lot of times it'll just be like, I always think of your options on a spectrum of good, better, best, and can I take this item and move it slightly to the right? So some of it might be quality of what you're eating, but think about this first week of just tracking and kind of seeing what you're noticing and like, are there any patterns or trends around your carbs specifically where you might want to upgrade items that will make it easier to sort of stretch it out further? Yes?
You mentioned like tracking, not the app that we're going to download, but I'm assuming I must have missed the boat here. Are we supposed to download some app?
Oh, sorry, I didn't even say that. So for those of you, it's the same. Coach Catalyst is the app that My Gym is what it looks like. So it's this.
It's called My Coach.
My Coach, sorry.
It is Coach Catalyst.
It's My Coach. It's the same one if you did the challenge with us back in the fall. I will email all of you a link to this tomorrow, so don't stress. I'll email it to have you download it. But basically when you open the app, your task for the day, it's going to be sitting there. It's going to tell you, like, here's what you need to do this week. You're going to need to check that off every day. Part of the challenge is like the compliance of, are you checking off your task in here? This is also where there'll be a community, and this is where we'll be like sharing ideas, crowdsourcing. John and I will be adding content. All of that will be in the community section. And then there's a button that says messages, and that will go directly to either myself or John. It's like a collective inbox. Joe can see it as well. So if you have questions that you don't want to post in the group, but you want to ask privately to a coach, you can do that as well. And so the My Coach app is what we'll use for that. And so I'll send that out. Other questions? Oh, I just brought this for visually. This is another reason so do y'all see the difference visually between these? But this is what will happen. People will log 1 medium apple. Well, like, what is a medium apple, right? Like, is it this? Is it this? But there is a difference in caloric value between these two. So like slicing this and weighing it, like either I ate 50 grams worth of apple or I had 150 grams. Like there is a difference. And so that's why knowing what you're actually eating and like weighing it is important, because I don't know the difference between these, but in an app, it might just say 1 medium apple. And like, there's obviously a difference between, and again, an apple's not going to make you, it's an easier choice. Here's another example I just think is helpful, is around using a scale. So again, something like granola, which tends to be pretty calorically dense because it typically does have fat. This is what it always is fascinating. So 1 serving of this is 30 grams. So, it's like, well, surely, okay, let me just okay, that's about right. Okay, that was 23 grams, and that was in a quarter cup. So this says for a third. The point is, typically when you use measuring cups or spoons, you will find that they're not accurate. So you may think you have a third of a cup, but you actually don't. And so by doing it this way, that was 34 grams worth of granola. I can log that I had 34 grams of granola, not an eyeball of I think that was a third of a cup. It's just stuff like this, especially, you can easily underestimate what you're eating. And so that's why it's important to actually know that you know how much did I get out of the bag. It's really important. We'll be sharing tips and ideas around other things. This is a favorite. A lot of y'all probably, have y'all seen Bonza pasta before? This is an example of taking something you enjoy like pasta, but upgrading it, because not only does this have a significantly more protein than regular white pasta, it also has a ton more fiber. So you're getting kind of a twofer. So we'll be talking about specific products or ideas of taking something that you love and trying to find an upgraded version of it. And so I brought that as an example. These are my beloved. I have Chris on these as well. I will fight somebody in public so that they get all these. Just be prepared. They're so good, but they're high fiber, low sugar cookies, and they're really good. Other questions for me? I want to be mindful of the time. What will happen from here is I'll send out an email tomorrow. Again, this just reminding you sort of the week by week structure. This first week really is more of a baseline of get your numbers, use your calculator, get all that figured out, but really take this first week as taking stock of getting my scale, getting in the habit of weighing and measuring every day, not necessarily trying to aim for a target, but really thinking about establishing my baseline and seeing how far off am I from really where I need to be for awareness, and then we'll incrementally make shifts as we go on week by week. Anything else, Joe, that I need to cover?
I think that's it.
All right.
That's it. 5 weeks.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Thanks, Abby.
Absolutely. Yay.